Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, sir. Today we're going to discuss the continuation of our report, which is the Architectural Act of 2004, or also known as the Republic Act 9266. I believe that Ms. Bukayan already introduced you to the topic. So let me give you some inputs to learn further or to dive further to know what is the essence of this Republic Act. So my report starts with Article 3, or the examination, registration, and licensure. So in Section 13, talks about the qualification of applicant for the examination. So um, all we see here is the following qualification or following guidelines to be qualified as an examinee to the board exam for the um, architect, for architecture rather. So first is he or she is a Filipino citizen or a citizen of a foreign country qualified to take the examination. So if you are not Filipino, um, uh, pwede ka dili ka exam, if that makes sense, right? Kay kung nganong mag-exam ka sa Pilipinas kung at first dili ka Filipino, dili ni siya kanang discrimination na, but it is very kanang ano ba, kanang makatarungan good that the board requested that the examinee must be a Filipino. So let's proceed to he or she is a good moral character. So if you are not um if you don't have good moral character and have many offenses, that would be makonsider na siya og kanang dahilan para dili ka ma-reject ang imong application for the examination. So next is he or she is a holder of the degree of Bachelor of Science in Architecture conferred by the school, college, academy, or institute. So if you do not graduate or have the degree of Bachelor of Science in Architecture, why would you enter or why would you apply for the qualification for the board exam for architecture, right? It doesn't make sense, right? So kailangan jud nimo makahuman sa og architecture before ka mag-undergo sa board examination, particularly in architecture. So lastly, he or she has not been convicted of any criminal offenses or involving moral turpitude. So dapat wala siya kaso nga nabilin, kaso or reklamo ba na sa police, manang blatter, because that would be um, a ground for disqualification or rejection of your application. So let's proceed. Section 14, subjects for examination. So ang makita nato diri is the following common subject or kanang topics that kasali sa examination sa board exam. First is the history and theory of architecture, followed by principles of planning and architectural practice, structural design, building materials, and architectural specifications and methods of construction and utilities. Then urban design and architectural interiors. And last but not the least, architectural design and site planning. So ang mapansin nato dere, most of it is kanang for architecture lang yun siya nga subject, right? Although naman po tay mga murag nabal-an gamay sa halimbawa is building materials, structural design, but most of the topics are exclusive for architecture field only. So the board, subject to approval of the commission, may revise or exclude any the subjects and their syllabi and add new ones as the need arises to conform to technological changes brought about by continuing trends in the profession. So, ang ginamini niya is ang board na siya kapangyarihan para kuhaan or bag-uhon ang examination. Kay paano nimo halimbawa, di ba? We are now in the new curriculum which is ang Department of Education nag-add siya og 2 years which is the K to 12 program, right? So, ang naadira murag natay subject nga wala sa old curriculum, right? So, napoy subject sa old curriculum nga gi-merge into one subject sa new curriculum. So, because of that, ang board maghimo na siya ways para mag-cope up to the changes. So, di ba, kato sa una, pwede magamit tong calculator for engineering, di ba? Tong calculator nga, katong mga ginagamit lang nato nga calculator nga na mag shift solve. Pero karon, sad to say, dili na siya pwede sa ato ang board exam. So, maupod na ang ginahimo, mao nang ginahimo sa mga officials within that na nag-asikaso sa board exam para maging kuan gud ta ma-fit gud ta sa makahabol gud ta sa globally competitive countries, if that makes sense. So let's proceed to section 15, rating in the licensure examination. To be qualified as having passed the licensure examination for architects, a candidate must obtain a weighted general average of 70% with no lower than 50% in any subject. So, di man siguro taka-graduate sa college or university kung naatay 75 below, right? So, mao na ang ginapasabot diri. Dili nila i-entertain ang mga naay mga grades nga below 70. So, let's proceed. Excuse me. Kina-record. Kasi wala na po niya na-record. Section 16, Report of Ratings. The board shall submit to the commission the ratings obtained by each candidate within 30 calendar days after the examination. So, after daw the examination, ang board i-notify ta nila i-notify nila ang mga examinees if they passed or failed within the 30 calendar days after the examination. Og ang ilang way para ma-notify ang examinees through mail or emailing them. So, and napoy kanang mga sa news, sa dyaryo, mga online sites nga makita nimong mga result. Dagan kayo sila ways para maparating sa mga examinees kung nakapasa ba sila or sa kasamang palad kung dili bumagsak, wala. So let's proceed to section 17, which is the oath. successful candidates in the examinations shall be required to take an oath profession before any member of the board. Any government official authorized by the commission or any person authorized by the law to administer oaths prior to entering upon the practice of the profession. So, if kanang luckily nakapasa ka, after that, um, you will take an oath before ka mahatagan og identification card, if that makes sense. Kay ano man gud ni siya kanang murag acts of service ba kanang kung sa ano ba kanang murag mao ni siya ang magpahambol sa isa ka tao ba murag ana god the oath murag kanang magpa-release og ano ba honor to the field of architecture. So let's proceed. Section 18. Issuance of certificate of registration and professional identification card. A certificate of registration and professional identification card shall be issued to examinees who pass the licensure examination subject to payment of fees prescribed by the commission. A professional identification card bearing the registration number, date issuance, expiry date, duly signed by the chairperson of the commission. So, ang ginapasabot diri is, after the oath taking, naihatag ang board of directors or board officials sa imuha nga certificate og identification card nga magpamatuod nga ikaw ay isa ng ka-architect. At this moment kuan mo nga ano ka ba murag na naka sa cloud 9 nga di ka katuo nga la architect na di ko ana. So at this moment inamnam pa nimo ang kanang ano ba kanang imuhang dangal ano ba pride nimo nga after all the challenges that happens, you are now officially an architect. So let's proceed. Section 19, Roster of Architects. A roster showing the names and place of business of all registered professional architects shall be prepared and updated by the board, and copies thereof shall be made available to any party as may deem necessary. So, ang ginamining lang niya diri is gina-ready sa board officials ang imuhang identification nga ikaw ay legally o officially an architect na. Wala ba ka ng certified na ka ba? Gina-certified na ka nila or halimbawa ano go, di ba? Kung mo-apply ka sa isa ka business, kailangan man na nila og kanang ano mga proofs. So isa ni siya sa mga proof nga legally o officially architect na ka. Ginaasikaso na siya sa mga board officials. Ana. So let's proceed to section 20. Seal, issuance, and use of seal. A duly licensed architect shall affix the seal prescribed by the board bearing the registrant's name, registration number, and title architect on all architectural plans, drawings, specifications, and all other contract documents prepared by or under his or her direct supervision. So, ang kaninga moment na ni, mao na ni ang pag-release sa imuhang ano kanang identity as an architect. Ginahatag nila diri ang imong seal, sariling seal, o paano ni tama nga paggamit. Or ginatudloan na ka ba paano maging responsible architect. Sana all. pero as the time goes by, um, great power have its great responsibility. So di nimo siya ni ipatakag gamit butang or pahulam maskin kinsa, because there will be a epekto sa imuha. Great effect. It shall be unlawful for any architect to sign his or her name, affix her or his seal, or use any other method to signature or architectural plans, specifications, documents made under another architect's supervision, unless the same made such manner to clearly indicate the parts such work actually performed by the former. It shall be unlawful. So, dili gid mo ni siya ipataka og ano ba kanang paggamit, if that makes sense, o mogamit or moangkon og other works nga naay ilang sariling identification seal nga nakapaloob sa data or sa blueprint ba na. Drawings and specifications duly signed, stamped, or sealed as instruments of service are the intellectual properties. Intellectual properties means sila lang or ikaw lang ang makagamit. If that makes sense. All architectural plans, designs, specifications, drawings, and architectural documents relative to the construction of a building shall bear the seal. So, ang tanan imong gihimo, tanan imong gidrawing, tanan imong ginaplano, ug tanan blueprints nga imong gihimo, naagi na siya seal nga identification nimo. Og pagkahuman nimo nagbutang ana, wala na makaangkon ana sa imuha kundi ikaw lang. Sana all wala ginaangkon. Tik lang. So let's proceed. Section 21, identification of certificate of registration or professional identification card and professional tax receipt. The architect shall be required to indicate his or her certificate of registration and professional identification card, its date of issuance and duration of validity. So, dili ni siya, yan lang. Ano na ko. Kanang, dili ni siya, ang kanang, god, ang imong identification card is permanent, pero, naani siya expiration date if you kung pabayaon lang gud nimo, wala nimo gina-renew, if you do not renew the the following documents that you have, and kailangan nimo na magbayad og tax because you're already a professional citizen of the Philippines. So you must pay your tax. Let's proceed. Section 22. Section 22. Refusal to issue certificate of registration and professional identification card. The board shall not register and issue a certificate of registration and professional identification card to any person who has falsely sworn and misrepresented himself or herself in his or her application for examination, or to any person convicted by court of competent jurisdiction of a criminal offense involving moral turpitude, or guilty of or immoral and dishonorable conduct, or to any person of unsound mind. So, mao tong giingon ganina. if you will enter to this um, legal, official, and um, certified professional work, you must not involve in any criminal acts or offensive acts like that, because ang nakasalalay diri is ang imong lisensya. Magkamali lang ka og kanang maskin gamay lang gud or naaray magreklamo sa imuha and napatunayan nga mali jud ka o guilty ka sa mga ingana nga gihimo nimo, nay possibility nga dili ka hatagan og certificate og registration or identification card even though nakapasa ka sa board exam. Pwede na mahitabo. And ang board has all the rights to do it. So let's proceed. Section 23, suspension and revocation of certificates of registration, professional identification card, or special temporary permit. Excuse, na ako nakarecord. The board shall have the power upon notice and hearing to suspend or revoke the validity of a certificate of registration, professional identification card, or shall cancel special permit granted under this act to an architect or any ground mentioned under Section 22 hereof for the use of perpetuation of any fraud or deceit in obtaining a certificate of registration. So, parehas lang gud sa akong giingon ganina. The board has all the power to revoke or kwaon sa imuha ang imo lisensya if napatunayan nga guilty ka sa isa ka criminal acts or offensive acts. And most especially po, halimbawa sa, for example, sa board exam itself, nag-cheat ka or nagamit ka tong calculator nga katong ano god, di ba, na di ba sa naay na balita just like ingana, di ba, kanang mga calculator nga na memory card and di na ka mag-compute, maghatag na siya answer sa mo directly. So please avoid that because it can contribute or it can foul you from the goal that you wanted whole your life. Okay, so let's proceed. Basta mao lang to. Ang sa section 23 is kanang naay power ang board to para bawion ang imuhang license if and only if napatunayan nila na guilty ka. So let's proceed to section 24. The issuance of or replacement of revoked and lost certificates of registration, professional identification card, or special and temporary permit. The board may after the expiration of 2 years from the date of revocation of the certificate of registration, professional identification card, or a special temporary permit, and upon application and for reasons deemed proper and sufficient, reinstate the validity of a revoked certificate of registration, and in doing may. So, ang ginamin lang niya diri is kung ang board kaya niya mabawi ang imuhang license or certificates or temporary permit, kaya niya mabalik po to. That makes sense. So let's proceed sa other topic, the Article 4, which talks about the practice of architecture. In section 25, talks about the registration of architects required. So no person shall practice architecture in this country or engage in preparing architectural plans, specifications, or preliminary data for the erection or alteration of any building located within the boundaries of the country, or use the little architect or display the word architect together with the another word, or display use a title, sign, card, advertisement, or other device indicate such persons practices or other to practices architecture or is an architect unless such person shall have received from the board a certificate. So ang ginamin lang niya dere is bawal ka mag-entitled sa imong sarili nga architect unless you pass the board examination and have the legal and official professional ID or professional identification card and the certificate. So let's proceed. A foreign architect or any person not authorized to practice architecture in the Philippines who shall stay in the country and perform any activities mentioned in the section 3 and 4 of this act or any other activities analogous thereto in connection with the construction of any building structure, edifice, or land development project shall be deemed engaged in the unauthorized practice of architecture. Although graduate ka or passer ka sa mga board ng architecture outside our country, wala gyapon kay karapatan nga mag-i-display ang architect sa imong pangalan kung wala kay special permit galing sa board or sa any authorized government or non-government ay government owned basta basta sa field sa architects nga magpatunay nga pwede nimo magamit ang imuhang title diri sa Philippines. So let's proceed. Section 26, vested rights. Architects registered when this law is passed. All architects registered at the time this law takes effect shall automatically be registered under the provisions hereof, subject, however, the provision herein set forth as a future requirement. So it is very self-explanatory kaya, no? So let's proceed. Section 27, reciprocity requirements. A person who is not a citizen of the Philippines at the time he or she applies to take the examination shall not be allowed to take the licensure examination unless he or she can prove in the manner provided by the rules of court that by specific provisions law the country which the so ang ginamin lang niya dere is kailangan mo mapatunayan imong sarili nga dili ka immigrant before ka mag-take sa examination sa board examination for the architecture. Kailangan nimo mag-present og halimbawa school nga diri ka nag-eskwela ana ba or you are a Filipino citizen ana mga other proof para maka-exam ka ana. So next let's proceed to section 28, continuing professional development. Ang nakapaloob diri is dili dapat ka mag-improve, dili ka stagnant by practicing the continuing professional development. Dili ka kanang magkinambog nga wala dili na anong kon pa man ako na nga architect naman ko dili ang ana. So kailangan nimo mag-undergo og improvement para makasabay ka sa dagan sa global standards. That makes sense. So let's proceed to section 29. Provision in the practice of architecture and penal clause. Any person who shall practice or offer to practice architecture in the Philippines without being registered, licensed, and who are not holders of temporary special permits in accordance with the provisions of this act. So ang nakapaloob lang diri, kailangan nimo maging and legally and officially um kana ano ba? Legally and officially titled nga architecture within the country para dili nimo maranasan or makuha ang mga fines o imprisonment if napatunayan nga dili ka karapat dapat sa titled na ana. So ang mga fines is not less than 100,000 pesos but not more than 5 million pesos, or to suffer imprisonment for a period not less than 6 years, or both, at the discretion of the court. So let's proceed. Section 30, prohibition in the practice of architecture. A person or entity, whether public or private, Filipino or foreigner, who which shall intis compel, heirs, require, or otherwise force an architect registered and licensed under this act to undertake, perform any service under the general practice of architecture as defined under this act without first executing written contract service agreement shall be guilty of mis mis misdemeanor, and shall upon conviction be sentenced to a fine not less than 200,000 pesos, or suffer imprisonment for a period not exceeding 6 years, or both, at the discretion of the court. So, ang ginamin niya dere is, although architecture ka, or architect ka, rather, dili ka pwede dili magbuhat og agreement if you will engage into having clients. Kanang ano god, kung magtrabaho ka without any agreements or documents that supports or bind your uh what that bind your contract with your client, mapatawan ka og parusa nga 200,000 pesos fines, or magsuffer ka imprisonment not exceeding 6 years, or both. So kailangan nimo og legal documents nga mag-support nga legal ang inyong kontrata, or legal ang inyong sa tawagan niya na legal ang inyong building nga patindugon with your clients. So let's proceed to liability of representative of non-registered persons, or the section 31. It shall be unlawful for any person or firm or corporation to seek to avoid the provisions of this act by having a representative or employee seek architectural work in their behalf. So, ang ginapasabot niya diri is dili pwede ang isa ka architect nga magsugo og dili license nga tao para maghimo og magperma og plan. That makes sense. Kung ikaw ang architect, dapat ikaw ang mangulo sa inspection og plan sa balay. Ay dili inspection, kay engineer ang anata. Magplano og mag-assure nga ang kanang aesthetic nga imong gihimo is safe sa client. Dili ka pwede mag-hearsay anagod, mag-hearsay ang isa ka tao by your name. Gamiton yung pangalan ng architect. Dili siya pwede maggamit og pangalan nimo or magsugo ka sa iyaha to inspect ang isa ka plano. So let's proceed. Section 32, signing of architectural plans, specifications, and other contract documents. It shall be unlawful for any architect to sign or in his or her name affix his or her seal or use other method of signature or architectural plans, specification, or other contract documents made under another architect's supervision. So, ang ginapasabot diri is dili ka pwede maggamit sa work sa isa ka architect or sa architect na uban. Kailangan imuha lang yung work or imuha lang yung um, sealed nga work ang gamito nimo nga himuon nimo o nga i-build nimo, if that makes sense. Kay kung kuan ka magamit ka og uban nga hinimuan murag ano na siya, di ba? Naman ay batas nga bawal ka magamit og other nga ano other other works sa uban nga sealed pa jud, legally ano pa jud. Halimbawa or kanang imuhang plano sa isa ka ano god, di pud ka pwede mag mag-reuse og plano nimo. Halimbawa napatindog na nimong isa ka building tapos gamiton pa to nimo nga plano for another client. Murag lain na siya ano no, di na siya makatarungan and unlawful po na siya. Pwede ka makasuhan. So let's proceed. Section 33. Ownership of plans, specification, and other contract documents. Drawing specification, other contract documents duly signed, stamped, or sealed instruments of words are intellectual property of the convenience architect, whether object for which. So, mao to kung mauning ano, ginasupport niya ako ang arguments ganina nga bawal jud ka maggamit og uban nga mga dili gud ikaw ang naghimo because ano na siya unlawful, dili pwede, makasuhan ka sa tag-iya o dili siya murag mawalang honor sa imuhang title because of that. So let's proceed to non-registered person shall not claim equivalent service. Person not registered as an architect shall not claim nor represent either service or work as equivalent to those of duly qualified registered architects. So, kung ano, halimbawa, graduated or nakagraduate ka sa ano, Bachelor of Science in Architecture, dili ka pwede nga maggawa dayon og mga architectural plans, magperma-perma, because you are not entitled yet. Wala pa ka board exam o wala pa kay identification card or identification card na mag-support sa imuhang mga plano nga matibay. Although ano ka bihasa ka na or kanang specialty nimo na pero di ka pwede magpataka-pataka og ingana because nana siya kakibat nga parusa if you did that. So let's proceed to Section 35, positions in government requiring the services of registered and licensed architect. Within 3 years from the effectivity of this act, all existing and proposed positions in the local and national government, whether career, permanent, temporary, or contractual and primary requiring the service of an architect shall be filled only by a registered and licensed architect. So it is very kuan na kayo ba, makahinga na ka if you are licensed architect because lots of benefits awaits you in that in the field if you are legally, officially, and licensed architect. Let's proceed to Section 36, collection of professional fees. It shall be unlawful for any unregistered person to collect a fee for architectural service except as an employee collecting fee responsible registered architect. So ang ano man ang tumong man jud sa magpapanggap kag architect no is to earn money. So dili jud pwede na mag-pretend ka or mag-fake kag identity as an architect just to earn money because kanang earning mo is gamay pa na sa makuha ni mga kaso if you will be pleaded guilty. So let's proceed. 37. Section 37, limitation to the registration of a firm, company, partnership, corporation, or association. The practice of architecture is a professional service, admission to which shall be determined upon the basis of individual personal qualifications. However, a firm, company, partnership, corporation, or association may be registered or licensed as such for the practice of architecture under the following conditions. Only Filipino citizens properly registered and licensed as architects under this act may, among themselves or together with allied technical professionals, form, obtain registration as firm, company, partnership, association. So, ano gid na siya? It is a must. As what I've said earlier na kailangan jud ma-prove nga Filipino citizen ka before ka i-declare as a legal licensed architect that can um, sa tawagan na, function in this country. So let's proceed to registered and licensed architect shall compose at least 75%. So mao na siya ganina kung kinakuan earlier. Individual members such firm partnership association. So pare-pareho lang to sila. So let's proceed. Section 38, coverage of temporary special permit. Foreign nationals who have gained entry in the Philippines to perform professional services as architects or consultants in foreign funded or assisted projects of government or employed or engaged by Filipino or foreign contractors or private firms shall, before assuming the duties, function, responsibilities, architects or consultants secure special temporary permit from the board subject approval or commission of the practice his or professional connection to yala kung natag ka ng ano murag ang gina-emphasize niya diri dili ka basta-basta maka function or maging entitled nga architect sa Philippines kung foreigner ka. So you must apply a temporary or special permits to kanang para i-honor imong title as an architect here in the Philippines. Kay lahi-lahi di ba taog koan means of education in each country. So kailangan nimo makapasa sa mga qualifications to gain the temporary or special permit. Let's proceed. Basta nga para na sila. Section 39, liability insurance of a person or entity allowed to practice under a temporary special permit. Foreign nationals, including former Filipinos wanting to engage in general practice of architecture, defines Section 3 at they must secure locally professional liability insurance or malpractice insurance or their acceptable equivalent in bond form commensurate with the nature and magnitude of their project involvement and their compensation, documenting rules and regulations. For such requirement for practice shall be implemented by the board in consultation with the integrated and accredited professional organization of architects in 6 months from the effectively of this act. So this specifically means that kailangan nimo magkuha og insurance if you are not is citizen of the Philippines and you are an architect that kanang na based diri sa Pilipinas, because dili gid maiwasan ang accidents and incidents that may happen outside your country, which is specifically here in the Philippines. Dili man gid na gina ano sa government kung wala kay insurance. That makes sense. So let's proceed sa final article sa among report, which is the Article 5, the final provisions. So Section 40, the integration of the architecture profession. The architecture profession shall be integrated into one national organization which shall be accredited by the board, subject to an approval commission as the integrated and accredited professional organization of architects, provided, however, that such organization shall register the Securities Exchange Commission. So, ang ginamin lang niya diri, dapat na isa ka organization nga mag-focus sa architectural field. Paras na gud sa ato sa engineering is PICE, di ba? O natong organization. Diri sa architecture, napod sila organization para mag-supervise sa ilaha nga or magtanaw sa ilaha, ano ba, murag mag rule within them para ma-control niya ang flow sa law, kung nasunod ba nila or kung nabay anang incidents nga maglabag sa ilang law o mga disiplina or reinforce dayon ba ana god, murag mao ni siya ang organization, ang key para magkaisa ang mga architectural basta sa architectural field. So let's proceed. Section 41, implementing rules and regulation. Within 60 days after the activity of this act, the board, subject approval commission in coordination with the integrated and accredited profession organization. So ang organization, ang yaging function ani is to implement the rules and regulation para ma-minimize ang di pagkakaintindihan to misunderstanding, ang conflict within the field, para mogamay ang ano nila ba, ang problema nga mahitabo. So let's proceed. Section 42, appropriations. The chairperson of the Professional Regulation Commission shall immediately include the commission programs, the implementation of this act, the funding which shall be included annual general appropriations act. So to avoid any kadang kurakot, di mo gina maiwasan ang kurakot sa mga ano no, sa organizations, mga ingana sa political, mga ingana god. Kanina man po'y politics sa organizations. So mo enter na dira ang commission, ang Professional Regulation Commission or PRC, to secure the funding of the organization. So let's proceed. Act not affecting other professionals. This act shall not be constructed to affect or prevent the practice of any other legal. So kung architecture field lang yun, o lang nang ginatanaw sa ang saklap or ang scope sa ilang rules and regulations, di maapektuhan ng uban nga field. Even the engineering field, dili na siya maapektuhan because na sila sarili pong organization. So kung halimbawa nag-away ang architectural or naay kanang conflict sa architecture, dili makisaw-saw ang engineering, di ba? Kung napoy conflict ang engineering organization, di po magsaw-saw ang architectural because wala sila karapatan. So let's proceed. Section 44, enforcement of the act. It shall be the primary duty of the commission and the board to effectively enforce the provisions of this act. So kung naay conflict nga mahitabo sa usa ka organization, mo kuha na gid mosulod diri ang board and commission para na enforcement ba na ay mag tawag ani ana mag dili defend mag uh, sa tawag ani ana man mag-stand sa law within the organization or within the field of architecture itself. That makes sense. So let's proceed. The separability clause, section 45. If any clause, provision, paragraph, or part hereof shall be declared unconstitutional or invalid, such judgment shall not affect, invalidate, or impair any other hereof, but such judgment shall be merely confined to the clause. So, ang purpose ani is, or ang ginamin ani is, tanan mga law o regulation dapat naka-abide sa Constitution. Kung ang isa ka law dili siya wala siya naka-follow sa constitution itself, ma-invalidate na siya. Dili na siya gina-honor sa tanan. Tanan jud kay although 'di ba ingon ako ganina kay naka-separate ang law sa halimbawa sa engineering o sa architects. So pero ang gipag-usapan nato diri ang constitution. So ang constitution mao ni siyang garul over all the Philippines. Maskin maka-private man ka or maka-public man ka, wala siya ginapili. So kung dili na siya naka-abide sa constitutional laws, dili na siya i-honor. Dili na siya ma-honor, rather. So let's proceed. Section 46, Repealing Clause. Public Act number 545 as amended by the Republic Act number 1581 is hereby repealed and all other laws, order, rules, regulation, resolution, or parts thereof inconsistent with the provisions of this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. Section 47, Effectivity. This act shall be effective 15 days following publication. Okay, self-explanatory. So that ends our report, brother. So again, my name is Ervin M. Imba. Thank you for listening to my report. I hope you gain some information that will help you understand the essence of architecture in everyone. So thank you again and God bless.